Have you ever heard of an old game called The Theater? Yeah, didn't think so. Probably because many say it doesn't even exist. You see, The Theater was an old game released around the same time as Doom. Today, if you do ever find it, it's only available on crappy bootleg CD-ROMs, which more often than not don't even contain the actual game. The actual legitimate copies that they say were released back in the day feature a blank cover with nothing on it. But in spite of what has been since named the Ticket Taker, he is simply just a poorly drawn, pixelated, bald Caucasian man with large red lips wearing a red vest over a white shirt and some black pants. He is completely expressionless, though some do say if you smash the disc, his face is shown as angry as the next time you open the cover, though this is just dismissed as some kind of urban legend. What is peculiar about The Theater, though, is that there is no developer named on the jewel case, nor in the game description on the back. It is simply the Ticket Taker on a white background on both sides. The game was initially known for its inability to install correctly. The installation process immediately locks up the computer, just around when the user will reach the licensing agreement, with the disc still inside. They are prompted to press "Yes, I agree" on startup. Then they continue with the installation. If a player supposedly manages to find his way to a working copy, they said the installer window will still freeze and stop responding, just before you can click your first next. But then again, some also said that it was not their PC that locked up, but it's only the installer that freezes. It's unknown if these are actual copies or fakes, but it's widely thought that these working copies are just to draw internet attention with no proof of installation effects. Upon proper installation, the game starts up without any introduction besides a main menu that is simply just a panoramic view of the theater's exterior on some kind of empty street. The title fades in, then the three menu buttons: New Game, Load, Options. Selecting Options immediately crashes the game. Load is said to have no function at all. Even if you do have a saved game, nothing happens when you press it. Thus, New Game is the only working menu option. Once it is selected, you are in a first-person view. You are standing in an empty movie theater lobby, with the exception of the Ticket Taker, standing in front of a dark hallway, which one can only assume leads over to the theaters themselves. There's really nothing to do besides look at poorly drawn, mostly illegible movie posters, or approach the Ticket Taker. Once the player moves toward the Ticket Taker, a very low quality sound clip of a player saying, "Thank you, please enjoy the movie," plays along with a speech box saying the exact same thing. Then you walk into the hallway, and the screen fades to black. You're back in the empty lobby, and you do the exact same thing again and again and again. While this may sound like a really horrible game, a number of peculiar things can occur when you play it. The number of times you have to continue into the hallway after giving your ticket to the Ticket Taker before the strange events start to happen is unknown. Most state that it is completely random and can take anywhere from the first playthrough to 400th. What happens, though, deeply disturbs some players. The first real occurrence is when the player fades to black after walking in the hallway. This time, they notice that the Ticket Taker is completely absent. The player then, without any option, decides to walk through the dark hallway. The sound clip and the text box still play in the absence of the Ticket Taker, but when the player walks into the hallway, the screen does not fade out. It goes pitch black as they walk deeper into the hall, but the player's footsteps can still be heard playing as you continue to push the button on your keyboard. Those claiming to have played the original game report to have felt really uncomfortable walking down the hallway, anticipating the whole way that something horrible is going to happen. Well, eventually the player is unable to move forward. There is nothing except for a few moments of this strange vision that is described as the Ticket Taker, but with a swirl face, appearing before the player. The original players of the game say their body immediately froze up and their stomach started to churn when they saw this image, which was appropriately named Swirly Man Head. Nothing happens when Swirly Man Head stands before them. Then this sudden piercing screeching sound plays as the game glitches out. This lasts for a few minutes, with the screen being continuous. The players abruptly return to the lobby with all the sounds and graphics being the way they should be. The game continues normally for the next couple of cycles of entering the hallway. A couple of the original players claim that the Swirly Man Head would briefly appear then disappear in the corner of the screen, just as a brisk yelp sound would play. Then, at some point, after meeting the Swirly Man Head, the player sees the ticket taker pacing back and forth, though there is no walking animation. The image's limbs are completely static. He just hops up and down slightly as a substitute, with his eyes being wide and his mouth open to simulate this kind of worried facial expression. Some players have noted that the movie posters have been replaced with images of the Swirly Man's head, which caused them to immediately turn their character's head away from the posters and approach the ticket taker. Then another different low-quality sound clip plays, but the speech box contains nothing but corrupted characters that causes whatever text would have been in the box completely illegible. Due to the extremely low quality of the sound, it's debated by players what exactly the ticket taker says at this point, though it's widely agreed that he does say, "Never reach the other levels." Then the screen fades out once again, and the player returns back to their starting point in the lobby. But the ticket taker is gone. The hallway is blocked by a large brick wall. Touching the brick wall will immediately crash the game. That's all there is to it. No one knows what the other levels are, or how to gain access to them, nor is it known why the Swirly Head Man causes such an acute fear in those who tend to see him. All the original copies of the theater have been lost or destroyed, but the creepiest part is that all of the original players claim to have occasionally just seen a brief glimpse of the Swirly Head Man somewhere on the screen. The true story of the theater. It's not really something whispered about in certain circles. It's not something that comes in a plain-looking jewel case. It's not by a nameless, untraceable developer, and it's certainly not supernatural. The game in question is called The Theater, R before E, and was developed by a company called Sedila Software. I'm fairly certain it's an English company despite the Spanish name. As far as I know, all they made was learning software. I have a match suite that came from somewhere around them. The theater is also probably meant to be some sort of edutainment game. The game probably was never finished, maybe from lack of funding or the whole company going under at one point. The description in the story is actually pretty accurate. It is in a first-person perspective with flat 3D-ish images all around the environment, and it's glitchy as all hell. The ticket taker does have an egg-shaped body, and one of his hands is huge and misshapen. I think it's to look like he's reaching toward you for the ticket, maybe? The description of the Swirly Head Man is also accurate. It's just a glitched out version of the ticket taker. But I saw a few people saying he looks kinda like Gygus. That is not the case. His features are just swirled, and it looks red because his lips are gigantic, remember? I have absolutely no idea why this happens, because while there are a few character images in the game resources, that isn't one of them. Oh, and just to clarify, some of the images are a bit creepy. That's it. It's not all terrifying, it's never filled me with a sense of dread. It's just a bit creepy. The game plays pretty much exactly like stated in the story. So accurate, in fact, that I think the author just downloaded it somewhere and decided to make a scary story out of his experience. I will admit that some of the things in the game can be unsettling, but not oh my god shit your pants scary. Like I said, the game is unfinished and very glitchy. I think the idea is to select a movie off the wall, enter the theater, and play a minigame. The minigames are glitchy and missing resources, to the point of almost being unplayable. But there doesn't seem to be any time limit on any of them, so you just have to plow through until you've got something correct enough times to be dumped back into the lobby. What's described in the story does happen. If you don't select a movie, you'll be allowed to enter the theater, but since the parameter of which game to load hasn't been set, you'll just end up right back in the lobby. Now, here's where it gets a bit weird. If you continue to enter the theater without choosing a movie, odd, sometimes creepy things can happen. I'm not sure why, but if I were to make an educated guess, it's because glitching past all the minigames like this causes variables to reach values they're not really meant to, resulting in things happening where they shouldn't. Or, the game is just glitched to all shit. It's been years, but here are some of the effects I can remember. The swirly man head, movie posters appearing out of their frame, textures changing colors, legitimately disturbing audio issues, other characters, and other areas. The last two areas are obviously the most interesting ones. Sometimes you'll spawn in a small room with a black floor and green walls, which will crash the game if touched. Sometimes you'll appear in a room similar to the lobby, with a kind of concession stand. There'll be a woman behind the counter with incredibly poorly drawn popcorn machine and a soda fountain, but that's all just an image on the wall. It's basically just a big yellow concession stand mural. I don't remember if you can interact with it or not. The only character that appears worth talking about is the guy in the brown jacket, who appears on the sidewalk outside the lobby. Looking back, I don't remember the story mentioning this, but to the left of where you start out is a small row of glass doors, looking out onto the street of the theater. If you glitch past the minigames enough times, a man in a weird-looking jacket, I think it's supposed to be a tweed? I don't know, with a huge smile on his face will just be on the other side of the door staring at you. And I mean a huge smile, like Freaky Fred or something. You know what? Since he kinda has the same body as the ticket taker, he kinda looks like the mayor from A Nightmare Before Christmas. It's not a smile that's creepy though, it's just broad. What is creepy are his eyes. While the ticket taker, ashtray, and other people in the game will always face you, this guy is anchored in place like one of the walls or something. His eyes, however, are always staring at you. Just thinking about it gives me the chills. Okay. While there's nothing overly scary or supernatural about the game itself, that's one of the things I will admit legitimately scares me. Like a weird porcelain doll. That's pretty much about it to the theater. If you can find it somewhere, I'd recommend downloading it just to see what it's like. Oh, and one thing I've forgotten. As stated in the story, the thing is to get it to run, just to say the least, difficult. I think somebody got a hold of all the code and resources and just compiled it into their own installer or something. Again, there's nothing paranormal about the installation. It just doesn't work that well. I'd like to thank all of the amazing patrons currently listed on screen right now. Dan R, Neophyte Games, Chaos X, JY, Pyromancer, Hayden MH, Ethan A, Daniel H, Maximilian Charles P, Go Cute Puppy, LLC, Young Sykes, Dark Side of the Bear, Revenak, and Paul T. Guys, thank you all so much.